Welcome to our live today. Sorry about that. I'm adjust the camera just a little bit. So excited to see you guys here today to talk about boundaries and why they are our weapon, secret weapon for a happy, healthy life. How to know if you do or don't have them. I don't know about you, but I find boundaries and realizing that I don't have them in certain places that I didn't even know. I did not realize that I didn't have a boundary then, or don't, or that was part of the should be part of the conversation for myself. So I am so excited to join you guys and have this discussion because I think it's so fantastic for all of us. So if you're on, love to have a shout out, know you're here, and look forward to hearing your questions and comments so that we can have a really wonderful interactive discussion about boundaries. One of the things that I have come to realize is that growing up, I was taught in ways that taught me not to have my own boundaries. It was never intentional and it came from multiple different sources. And I know that in the past, so many people in general, and it's still there. We unintentionally are being taught not healthy boundaries from early on because we're taught that we're to please others, or that we can only who we are, other people tell us who we are or who they think we're best as, or what we should be doing, even into what sports or activities or what choices we should make. But even little, you learn to look outside yourself for your boundaries. People tell you yes and no, and so you don't learn to look for inside yourself for those boundaries, to understand that lining up with who you are and who you really are inside is the most important thing. And that I didn't realize I learned early on to please others. In order for me to be happy, I need to keep them happy or make them happy or get them happy again. And if they were mad at me, it was my fault. You made me angry. If you ever heard those words before, you made me angry. No one makes anybody else angry. Everybody's emotions are their choice. If in whatever way you chose to be angry about something I said or did, but I did not make you angry. That is something that I had to learn, and that I still have to go back and learn, because I can take it personally, right? Oh, I made you angry and it's my job to make you happy. No, it's not. That doesn't mean I don't have anything to apologize for, but I may not have intentionally said something that would make you angry, and then it's, helping to figure out if I have something to apologize for, great. But then the conversation goes from there. So let's see. How do we begin to identify if our boundaries aren't great? Oh, Christina says this is something I had to unlearn. I'm still unlearning it. I still find moments. So I think for many of us, it's an ongoing process, but it's a lot more fun once some of it starts to make sense. Because when you don't know if you do or don't have boundaries, and you don't understand why your world is so complicated, because everything's intertwined. I need you to be happy for me to be happy, so I'm mad at you because you're not happy, or you're mad at me, and and it's so mixed up, it's very hard to figure it out. Oh, Kimberly, being a people pleaser really is about having learned that you needed to make other people happy in order for you to be happy. So we're trained to be people pleasers, really. And it's because, and that's how we're taught not to have boundaries, and that is exactly what so many of us struggle with, including me. So that's exactly it. And learning that it's not our responsibility ever to make somebody else happy, nor is it their responsibility to make us happy. That's very important to know too. It's only up to us to make us happy. A spouse can't make us happy. We can have a joyful life together. But a lot of relationships, when you see a lot of codependency and that have been through a lot of struggle, it's because each of them, having already learned this and living life that way, think the other person is responsible for more of their happiness or unhappiness or feelings or choices. And they also try to live a happy life while conforming to what somebody else wants them to be, which isn't them. And so that's a constant conflict that creates a lot of emotional baggage and fights and tears and depression and all those things. So, how do we begin to recognize our boundaries? There's multiple ways. They all involve self love. Because not knowing where your boundaries are really comes down to having been taught early on that who you are, just being who you are, is not worthy. And that's not the intention, but that's what it comes across. If I have to make somebody else happy in order for me to be happy, then it doesn't feel like I'm important enough to be able to just be happy. Somebody else has to be happy or I'm not okay. And so, learning how to recognize those boundaries really comes down to learning how to let love in for yourself, how to love yourself. And some of the ways that have helped me, definitely the one we keep coming back to, will probably every live will give you free download for the appreciation PDF, which we've created a video we'll soon have out to go with that. But appreciation, and the most important part of it is for this part, for boundaries, is appreciation of yourself, and saying every day, writing down things that you appreciate about yourself, just even a few. What that does is help you start hearing the negative voice in your head that is constantly criticizing you. You're not enough, you can't do this, you don't know how to do that, you always make people angry, you always, all those terrible things that we say to ourselves and don't even know we're saying to ourselves because it's so ingrained in us. That will help you. Other things you can do, depending on what fits best for where you are now. Physical activity helped me a lot, starting to do kind things for myself, like exercise or walk or dance or sing, listen, create a favorite podcast. Do things to make yourself happy that matter to you. Take a bath, have lunch with a friend, anything you can do that is actually acknowledging that you are worthy of self-care. Because as you do that, you will begin to feel a bit more worthy. And in those steps, you'll start to see, like I realized at one point, people talked to me so ugly and I didn't even recognize it because I was so used to it. As I started being kinder to myself and taking care of myself, I started to hear things that I didn't hear before. To say, well, that's not appropriate. Well, I'm not okay if you talk to me like that. Things that I didn't recognize because my whole life I had heard people talking to me like that, people that I loved and cared about. And so I did not realize that it was not appropriate and that it crossed boundaries. And the same saying goes, I said things that were not appropriate to say to other people at times, out of lash out, out of, in that same space. Because when you start realizing that you're not okay with somebody talking to you like that, and it was at times employees, family members, across the board. But then you have to realize if you're not okay being talked to like that, you're also not okay talking to people like that. And you have to start learning how to soothe yourself and get control of those things that you haven't in the past. All comes back to self-love, because from self-love, true self-love, you begin to have more self-control. Something we touched on last week is when you start to recognize some of those boundaries, how do you set them? Because in general, if we're in a place where we don't have healthy boundaries, then we have relationships around us, close people that we care about, that don't have boundaries either, and have already learned how to push us to get, because they need us to do certain things for them to feel okay. So if we set a boundary and they're not okay with it, they're going to push that. They're not going to be okay with you setting a boundary, right? So that's one of the biggest challenges we have. Yes, Christina said, how do you hold them once you set them? I find myself giving in on my boundaries or giving people more chances. So one of the first things I want to say is one of the most important things that comes out of this. What is the thing that we most likely do when we have a hard time holding a boundary that we've never set before? You know what we do? And tell me if I'm wrong, Christina. We beat ourselves up. Well, why couldn't I do better at that? I should have done this. Should have is like shooting on yourself is not a good thing, right? It's like saying you were wrong and you couldn't and you didn't. It's hard. It's being hard on yourself. So setting boundaries is about being kind to yourself when you don't get there, because at least now you're seeing them. So say kind things. There's like, you know what? I'm seeing the boundaries now. And while it's going to take me a minute to figure out how to set it and hold it. And the more I give myself love and care, the better I'll get at this. And the easier it will get for me because I've never done it before. So it's like a baby learning to take steps. How many times does a baby fall down as they're learning to walk, right? A lot. And it's okay. It's okay. So be kind with yourself and note every progress that you make the second time you're able to do it, when it gets a little easier. Kimberly said, the first time that I said no was hard. I wanted to shrivel up. Yep. And the first time that I said this is not safe was even harder. But realizing that I was actually putting me first has made it easier. Well, and for me, one of the things, because I struggled with putting myself first, and then I realized that when I put myself first, it's actually the greatest gift I can give to people around me. How much more we can show up for others, how much kinder we can be when they're not in a good space, when we're not taking it personal because we're actually showing up for us, is huge. Victoria says, I love your most recent saying, loving yourself is letting God's love in for you. I feel like this goes hand in hand with, yes, and whatever you want to call it, God, universe, source energy, you are so loved. And we so often, we shut that out in a million different ways. You know what else? Letting other people do for you. It will help you have better boundaries when you allow people to give and you receive. Because when you don't allow people to give to you, you end up with friends and people around you who are takers, who will take until you have nothing left to give and they still only have take in them. And once this I learned from myself, and I recognized it in a friendship when I was going through cancer treatment. And it took me a while. So the thing is, I recognized it quite a while before I could actually completely walk away from it. And that's why I'm saying be kind to yourself. Be okay if those boundaries aren't perfect, because at least now you're starting to see them. And do kind things for yourself while you're learning it. Do everything else kind that you can. Take a bath, take a walk, read a favorite, a book that makes you feel good, listen to music that makes you feel good. Do everything you can to make yourself develop a toolbox of things to help yourself feel good, because that will let self-love in, and that love will allow you to set boundaries and to get better at it, because you'll feel better about yourself, and you'll start seeing that you can set loving boundaries. Because I don't know about you, but the first few times I set boundaries, I felt like I had to be mad to set them and angry. And honestly, that's still not self-love, right? Because you feel bad when you're angry, and you feel bad when you're angry at somebody. And sometimes you have to come back and apologize, which doesn't feel better at all. And it doesn't feel like you actually set a boundary if you have to come back and apologize for that. Oh, do a live on receiving. That's a great idea. I have had a hard time letting other people do anything for me. That's tough for me. It makes me so uncomfortable. But I so recommend it, Christina. And Kimberly, that's a great idea. I will do a live on receiving. I will, because, man, that is a huge door opening to self-love and worthiness. We don't feel good about people doing for us because we don't feel worthy of it. But then we end up with friends who are all, and people, and who we are, the valuable person that each and every person here is. You're not able to give that to others when you aren't able to receive and allow yourself the opportunity to be who, because when you don't feel worthy, you aren't able to be all of who you are. And that's so important. So receiving in any capacity, letting people around you do nice things for you, and being able to just say, and you can practice it before you believe it. This is one area where because you can say thank you, even though what you really want to say is, oh no, it's nothing. You can force yourself to just say thank you and smile. And as you do that, you'll start to feel a warm little tingle. You'll start to feel a little something. And you can still say to yourself, well, I'm going to do something in return. Giving and receiving is a beautiful reception. What you don't want to do is say, I have to give in order to receive, because that's not true. And God will give you so many places to, as you receive, you will receive so many places to give. You will have so much more. You won't be exhausted. You won't feel downtrodden. You won't feel beaten down and worthless as you let in this love. This I can promise you, because I have walked that place. I have been in that place where you were, Christina. You are, Christina. I've lived there for years. And I can promise you that as you start to say thank you, and as you start to receive the compliments and the gifts that people want to give you, what you will feel is like nothing you've ever experienced. And the amount of love you will have to give out to the world, and the way you will feel will change. And it is, oh my goodness, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. So, so self-love really helps you to start to see boundaries, ways that you can recognize that you don't have boundaries, or that your boundaries aren't quite where you want them to be, is when you feel responsible for how somebody else feels. They tell you you're having a bad day and you feel like you need to help them fix it. Then you're bound, because your job is never to do something for somebody else around that. Yes, you can give them a compliment. Yes, you can bring them a gift. If they ask for your advice, you can give it, but then it's not appropriate if that is a continual stream to where someone is just dependent upon you trying to do it for them, because you can't make anybody else happy. It's all happiness, joy, worthiness is all inside jobs. We can give people step-by-step things. We can give you ways to recognize it, but the other person has to do the walking. And it really helps if you practice loving them right where they are, because that also gives you the gift of loving yourself right where you are. Even if they're, struggling and in pain and having, if you just say, you know what, I know you're a beautiful person and I know what you have inside is magical. And if you are able to, maybe not in the moment you're struggling and having difficult conversations, but one of the ways that helped me learn to set better boundaries, and it came easier, visualize all the best things about the person that you are struggling with the boundaries every day, and write them down. Right? Even if you only have one thing at first, write it down, soak it up, appreciate it. Come back with another thing that you appreciate about that person, that you love, and because as you start to appreciate the good things, the other thing that happens is you start to attract the better things from them. And so that also helps. There are some people who are so far, as you develop boundaries, you may find that you separate, that you move away, and sometimes you may have to make a choice to walk away. My best recommendation is to make that choice from a place of love, meaning you're not mad at them. You're not trying to make them different than who you are. You just want, I'm at a place where I want to have a more reciprocal relationship. I want friends that I give to them and they give to me, and instead of someone that every time I hang up the phone or we hang out together, I'm exhausted and done with people by the time I finish that conversation, because they've just drained everything I have out of me. So, because some people, they don't know how to not be that way, right? And so that's their journey. That's their journey. And you can love them and let them have their journey, and take a healthier turn for your journey. So are there any other questions at this point around boundaries? I am excited. We will definitely be doing a live on receiving soon. I touched on some tips now. We'll have more when we come back. But is there anything else that anybody has any questions about today on starting to recognize boundaries and how to start gently, lovingly setting them and loving yourself so that you can see? Because that's the thing. When we don't feel worthy, we just can't see that we don't have boundaries or where they should be. And so it is that's why we did boundaries within self-love in this month's lives. Well, I love you guys so much. I appreciate your time here today, and I hope you come back for next week. We will be doing another live at 2 p.m. on Monday of next week. And as always, I am wishing you an extraordinary day and an extraordinary life, because you guys are amazing and you absolutely deserve it. Bye-bye.